You couldn't build a boat like this today. Not because we forgot how, or because the design was flawed. The reason you can't build a boat like this today is because the way it was built is so expensive that today's market just wouldn't bear it. It wouldn't sell. And that's a problem, because this manufacturing philosophy produced some of the best sailing, best balanced, most beautiful offshore boats in the history of sailing. And I'm not talking out of my ass here. These boats are genuinely beautiful and incredibly comfortable on the water. And here's where things get interesting. Boats like this are at a very precarious moment in their lives. Most of them are well over 30 years old. Some are pushing 40. Some are even beyond that. Which means, for the first time ever, you and I actually have the chance of owning one of these floating works of art. Boats that were never meant to be cheap, but are now priced at a fraction of what it would cost to build them today. But here's the real question. Are they worth it? Are they still something you can admire and use and actually sail? Or are they at the point now where they've crossed into being a major liability? Today, we're going to dive into the mind of one of the most prolific sailboat designers of the 21st century. We're going to talk about the manufacturing philosophy that made boats like this exceptional, what makes them comfortable offshore, why spreadsheets completely failed to explain them in any capacity that actually matters, and why this entire class of boats disappeared. And finally, whether buying one today is a brilliant decision or a very expensive mistake. This is the Little Harbor 59. It was designed by Ted Hood, built by Little Harbor Yachts. It's not a racer, it's not a charter boat, and it definitely is not a floating condo. It's a serious offshore cruising yacht. And to understand what makes it so special, you have to stop thinking about numbers in isolation and start thinking about behavior. When people first look at a boat like this, the instinct is to open up a spreadsheet. They check the ballast ratio and the comfort ratio and the capsize number. And look, I do this too. I teach people to do this. But with a boat like this, those numbers don't explain why it exists. Because boats like this were not designed to be marina queens. They're designed to look after their crews offshore when things stop going according to plan. And if any of you have read my book, you'll understand this is where I'm starting to salivate a bit. I usually tell people that all else being equal, a higher ballast to displacement ratio is better. For most modern production boats, that's still true. Around 35% is a good target. 40% is fantastic. Under 30%, I start to get nervous. It just makes the boat too tender for my taste. But here's the part spreadsheets don't tell you. How that ballast actually resists motion. So think about this. Imagine pushing an empty shopping cart. It moves easily and instantly. Every little input shows up right away. You can spin it around really quickly. Now load that same shopping cart full of groceries and evenly distribute the weight. Same push, very different response. It still moves, but it moves more slowly, more deliberately. Boats like this are the loaded cart. They don't rely on one trick for stability. They resist motion everywhere. You see, on paper, a little harbor like this carries less ballast as a percentage of its total weight, right around 29%. And that makes people uncomfortable when they're just looking at the paper. And if this were a light, beamy production boat, it should. But this is a heavy boat, a very heavy boat by design. It's a massive structure. It's got huge tanks. All of the machinery is carried very low in the boat. It's got very heavy joinery that's actually part of the structural form. And the total displacement is enormous. It's over 33 tons of boat. So even with a lower ratio, the actual amount of ballast is still very large. And more importantly, it's part of a system, not a single piece. And this is the part you're going to miss if you're just looking at a spreadsheet. On a lot of modern boats, ballast is treated like a single component, a bolt-on solution. A fin and a bulb. But on boats like this Little Harbor, ballast isn't just attached to the boat. It's integrated into the boat. The keel is massive. The sump is deep. The structure around it is heavy, encapsulated, and overbuilt. And it doesn't just stop there. All the machinery is placed deliberately low. Fuel and water tanks are kept low and central. They use very dense materials for the stringers that actually help stability. And instead of relying on one extreme lever arm under the boat, aka the keel, this boat carries its weight everywhere that matters. That lowers its center of gravity in a way that doesn't show up cleanly on paper. This is why boats like this don't feel particularly stiff at the dock, but they feel incredible offshore. They don't snap upright. They don't react violently. They settle in the water, and as the boat heels, resistance increases proportionally. The deeper it goes, the more it heels, the more the boat pushes back. And that's not an accident. That's exactly what Ted Hood designed this boat to do. That's the ballast placement structure that we're talking about, and the mass structure, and thousands upon thousands of man-hours of planning and building these boats. Now take that boat offshore and you'll feel that translation, because stiffness without progression turns into snap, and snap turns into fatigue, and fatigue is what really gets you. A heavy boat with a low, deliberate center of gravity doesn't react quickly. It dampens the motion of that wave, and it resists acceleration, which leads to a more comfortable ride and less seasickness and a crew that's not holding on for dear life. And if you've ever been on a light production boat offshore, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This is why people describe little harbors as easy offshore. Not fast, not exciting, easy. The motion is slower, the loads build gradually, you're not fighting the boat, you're working with it. And that just doesn't show up in a spreadsheet. It shows up at 3 a.m. when everybody's tired and the sea state keeps building, but you're on a boat you can trust. Now this brings us to the uncomfortable part. If these boats are so friggin' great, why did they stop building them? Boats like this didn't disappear because the idea was wrong. They disappeared because the idea was expensive. That kind of ballast strategy, that kind of structure and build quality requires more material, more labor, more time, more qualified craftsmen. I mean, just look at this boat. The joinery is insane on this thing. And you can't rush that. You can't mass produce that. And to be completely honest, they just don't sell as easily as you think they should or would. In a way, boats like this were victims of their own excellence. They were built to standards that the market eventually stopped paying for. Lighter boats are cheaper to build and margins are better for the manufacturing company. It was supply and demand, and unfortunately, most of us sailors are cheap bastards. But seriously, there's another factor here that we need to talk about, and it has to do with age. Like I said in the beginning of the video, most of these boats are now pushing 40 years old, and that doesn't make them bad boats, but it does change the rules. Most lenders are hesitant to finance boats this old. Some just won't at all. Some will with shorter terms or higher rates or stricter survey requirements. And the point is that it's another supply and demand thing. If you make it difficult for people to get financing, you're going to shrink your buyer market. Boats like this are usually cash purchases or very lightly leveraged. And insurance could also be a hurdle. Comprehensive hull insurance on a 40-year-old offshore boat isn't impossible, but it is harder, it's slower, and usually it's more conditional. Expect more surveys, more exclusions, higher deductibles, some geographic limits. Though I will say that on a well-maintained little harbor, you probably won't have any problem. Your chances are much higher of insuring this than, say, like a 40-year-old Morgan. And the last thing we need to talk about is the resale. Boats like this sell slowly, not because they're bad boats, but because, like I said before, the buyer pool is smaller. You're not selling to first-time buyers or lifestyle shoppers. You're selling to someone experienced, someone patient, someone with cash, and someone that understands exactly what they're buying. That takes time. None of these things are flaws in the boat per se. They're just features of this category of boats. Boats like this live in a very narrow space between too serious for most buyers and too old for the market to feel comfortable. That's why they represent both an incredible value and a real commitment. The cost of a dream sailboat isn't just the purchase price, it's the philosophy that you buy into. Boats like this assume you will eventually be caught out. They assume forecasts will fail, they assume fatigue will matter, and they're built accordingly. This isn't the right boat for everyone, but it's a perfect example of what can happen when a design prioritizes seamanship over marketing, which there's not a lot of those left. Understanding why boats like this were built and why they disappeared matters far more than memorizing any single number. In my opinion, little harbors are some of the coolest, most beautiful boats on the water, Every boat has its nuances and problems, but this one is built on some of the best design philosophy ever to touch this space. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think about Little Harbors in the comments below. And as always, much love, fair winds, and following seas.